Welcome, everyone. Today, we are going to dive deep into the dynamic landscape of autism spectrum disorder. We'll be tracing its diagnostic evolution, navigating its clinical complexity, and exploring the translational research that is really shaping its future right now.
Okay, so here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the historical journey of the diagnosis itself, then get into the weeds of the current clinical framework. From there, we'll tackle the sheer diversity within the spectrum, and we'll wrap up by looking at the absolute cutting edge of neuroscience. All right, let's start at the beginning by tracing the conceptual evolution of autism. Understanding this journey is absolutely key to appreciating the dimensional model that we use in clinical practice today.
And this timeline just perfectly illustrates the paradigm shifts in how we think about autism. We go from Bleuler's early concept of autismos and the parallel yet distinct work of Kanner and Asperger. But the really critical step, arguably, was in 1980. That's when the DSM-5 finally, and correctly, separated autism from schizophrenia. That one move set the stage for everything that followed, leading to the unified spectrum model in the DSM-5 and the recent alignment with the ICD-11.
So where does that leave us today? Well, the crucial point in our current definition really boils down to two words: heterogeneous and neurodevelopmental. This framework is such a critical shift. It gets us past a purely behavioral view to one that truly acknowledges the vast diversity of presentations and roots the condition firmly in the biological foundations of brain development.
So, how is this conceptual understanding actually operationalized? Let's take a look at the specific clinical criteria that guide diagnosis in practice. The DSM-5 marked a really key shift. It collapsed the previous diagnostic triad into this dyad of core domains. 1, social communication deficits, and 2, restricted repetitive behaviors. Now, this isn't just some structural change. It clinically reframes our entire assessment to focus on the interplay between these two domains, rather than just seeing them as separate issues.
Now, what's really interesting here is the focus on functional support. These three levels from the DSM-5, they are not a measure of how autistic someone is. That's a huge misconception. Instead, they're a specifier for the level of support an individual requires. And that's a crucial distinction when we're developing effective, individualized intervention and care plans. With that diagnostic framework in place, we can now confront the day-to-day clinical reality, which is, of course, the immense heterogeneity of the autism spectrum and all the complexity that co-occurring conditions bring to the table. Just take a look at these numbers. They're striking, and they absolutely reflect what we all see in practice. 70% of individuals have at least one co-occurring psychiatric condition, and 40% have two or more. It just makes the challenge of differential diagnosis and the absolute necessity of integrated treatment paramount. And as you can see, ADHD, anxiety, and depression are highly prevalent. That huge prevalence range for ADHD, that really underscores the diagnostic challenge of symptom overlap. It's so easy for one condition to lead to diagnostic overshadowing of the other. Meanwhile, the high rates of anxiety and depression just highlight the desperate need for mental health support that is specifically informed by how these conditions present in autistic individuals. And while intellectual disability co-occurs in about 70% of cases, that number can be a bit misleading if you take it at face value. It's vital to recognize that cognitive profiles are incredibly varied. A single IQ score almost never captures the spiky profile so common in autism, where you can have significant strengths in some areas right alongside major challenges in others. Gender also plays a critical role in clinical presentation, and it's something we have to be aware of. Females are much more likely to show internalized symptoms and develop these sophisticated compensatory strategies, what we often call masking or camouflaging. This can completely obscure the underlying autistic traits, which of course leads to misdiagnosis or a significantly delayed diagnosis, putting them at a much higher risk for co-occurring mental health issues. Okay, finally, let's turn our eyes to the future. Section 4 explores the frontiers of translational neuroscience, where basic science discoveries are actively being bridged into clinical applications to really deepen our understanding of autism's etiology. This field is moving at an incredible pace. We now understand that autism has a high heritability, and we have multiple risk genes identified. A lot of the focus now is on what are called synaptopathies, conditions that are rooted in the dysfunction of the synapse itself. This molecular-level understanding, along with the search for reliable biomarkers, really does promise to revolutionize both diagnostics and treatment.
And this pipeline, this really shows the path forward. We start with those fundamental genetic and neurobiological discoveries. From there, we move to identifying brain markers using advanced imaging. And the ultimate goal, of course, is to translate all of that knowledge into clinical applications, things like gene-targeted therapies and truly personalized interventions that are tailored to an individual's unique biological profile. So what does this all lead to? Well, it's a fundamental shift in our clinical mindset. We are moving away from a monolithic, one-size-fits-all view of autism and towards seeing it as a diverse spectrum of conditions. And this demands a dimensional, highly individualized approach to both diagnosis and support, one that is directly informed by this advancing science.
And that leads us to a final, critical question for all of us in the field. As our understanding of the fundamental biology of autism deepens, how will we adapt our clinical practices, our educational systems, and our support structures to actually deliver on the promise of truly personalized care?